influencer or boss, the case of some Haitian personalities in Haiti and abroad. A few days ago, a student came to me for help on an essay about leadership. He asked me the following questions. What is a leader? Are there good or bad leaders? Is an influencer a leader? Are all persons in charges of something's leaders? What's the difference between a boss and a leader? Like any good teacher who, when confronted with questions he or she can't answer, replied that these were very good questions. However, we'll make an appointment for another day to try and answer each question. First, let's try to define each term. Let's take the word influencer first. As the name suggests, an influencer is someone who is highly influential, a person who has established a certain notoriety and authority in his or her field and enjoys, in most cases, great popularity. Let's try to define the word director. Simply put, a director is someone who directs something. This definition could also apply to the English term boss, which tends to invade the lexical field of other languages. Finally, let's define the word leader. Loosely speaking, a leader is someone who directs or gives orders to a group. Considering these three definitions, someone might tend to use these terms interchangeably. However, in reality, these three words have profoundly different meanings. Now, let's try to contrast these three terms. There's no doubt that the influencer is also a boss. He or she directs his or her group to obey his or her orders, advice, and recommendations. However, the influencer is primarily in search of his or her own satisfaction or success. He or she must constantly maintain his or her influence by any means necessary. He or she seizes every opportunity that presents itself. He or she often changes position according to the needs of his or her cause. He or she must keep up with popular trends. In general, the influencer is in direct competition with other influencers. They are often preoccupied by the rise and power of others. Another fundamental characteristic of the influencer is that he must always be seen and heard. He must be the last to arrive and the first to leave, always in a hurry. He has time only for those who can contribute to his success or whom he perceives as superior to him. The influencer often plays both an offensive and defensive role. He's always on the defensive, the center of attention. In trying to achieve his objective, the influencer's actions can sometimes have positive or negative repercussions on his followers. Influencers must often be addressed by the title preceding his or her name. He or she could have a lot of trouble with someone who forgot to address him or her by the title for which he or she worked very hard, according to his or her definition of hard work. Influencers are often found in the entertainment industry. In music, for example, there are many influencers such as Taylor Swift, Ariana Grande, Beyoncé, and Cardi B, to name but a few. Closer to home, we could mention influencers such as Blondie Ferdinand, Florence, Rochelle Guillaume, and others. In short, the influencer is a boss. He or she may have employees reporting to him or her to manage his or her operations. Now, let's consider the term leader. If the influencer is far from being a leader, the leader, on the other hand, is unequivocally an influencer. A leader is someone who is responsible for guiding his or her subjects in the right direction. While the influencer follows the trend, the leader very rarely decides in the direction of the popular. The leader is a revolutionary who questions everything. He's not afraid to disrupt the system for the common good. Unlike the influencer, who always seeks to be served, the leader must always be at the service of others. He makes sure that everything goes well for others before thinking about himself. The leader must be the first to arrive and the last to leave. He always devotes time to others, regardless of their social status, ethnic origin, wealth, etc. He is always attentive and generally discreet. The leader takes responsibility for the mistakes of his troops, while the influencer or boss blames others for his own mistakes. The leader doesn't need to make noise to get noticed. He is naturally seen and noticed by all. He has no problem being addressed by his first name, despite his many titles and distinctions. We often make the mistake of thinking that a leader must necessarily be popular. In reality, there are leaders whose actions have far more impact than their notoriety. Let's take the example of the legendary maestro of the Tropicana Orchestra, Sir Octavius Charles, better known by his nickname T. Blan. For decades, he ensured that the orchestra he led was always at the top of its game. He cared for his musicians and disciplined them when necessary. Those who had the privilege of working with him tell us that T. Blan was always the last aboard and the last to leave the bus when his orchestra had to perform somewhere. The same applies to another Haitian music legend, the late maestro of the Septentrional Orchestra Ulrich Pierre-Louis. Whereas the boss is often a jealous person, always making sure he dominates, the leader recognizes the abilities and talent of others. He has no problem being surpassed by his followers or collaborators. He always takes the right opportunity to step aside when his mission is accomplished, or he identifies someone who can do the job better than he can. This brings us to another example of an excellent Haitian musician who left his mark on the Haitian music industry. Noticing the genius of Jean-Hérard Richard, aka Richie, Brutus Derasaint stepped back for years to let Richie shine, even ceding his place as maestro to Richie. We could also cite other examples of little-known leaders. Former President René Préval once told the story of a former director of the judicial police named Frans Thermelis. After the 2010 earthquake, the divisional inspector had lost several members of his family, including 2 children. For days, he continued to do his job, leading his troops as if nothing had happened. It was only several days later that the President of the Republic, whose palace was located at the Direction Centrale de la Police Judiciaire, learned that the divisional inspector had lost several members of his family. After all these considerations, we can conclude that there is no such thing as a bad leader. There are simply leaders. Adding the adjective good before the word leader is simply redundant. A leader who stops doing good deeds simply ceases to be a leader. On the other hand, the boss or influencer who starts to act selflessly and do good deeds gradually takes the steps towards becoming a leader. In our communities, whether in Haiti or abroad, we have many bosses or influencers, but very few leaders. Someone can set up a church or a for-profit or non-profit organization and call themselves leaders. Similarly, many responsible of political organizations label themselves leaders. However, in reality, they are often influencers, bosses, or simply people who generally meet all the characteristics listed above. Sometimes they show some leadership traits, but they are quickly unmasked by power, money, social status, or simply by a few influential friends, as is often the case in our communities in the USA and probably in other countries. It should be noted that the examples of artists cited above are intended to explain the term influencer. We have no intention of criticizing or judging, nor of attaching the wrong label to these personalities who have contributed in their own way to the development of society.